We don't want to just get the, I mean, it sounds, I mean, we don't want to just get our theology right. Like, that's like so important, right? I mean, I told Katie and Amy 100 times, you better get your theology right, right? Because it's right. It is important. But we also want to understand as much as possible the cultural what's going on, the bigger picture. I mean, not like the theology is a small picture. But all I'm trying to say is they got the same problem. You know, Paul here in Romans 6 is writing to these people. He got the same problem in the first century that Brad and David got in the 21st century. Right? Are you going to come to Christ and then you're going to keep on sinning? No way. You can't do that. And so when it comes to you and I discipling somebody, right? I guess like in our pride, we can say, "Hey, what are you doing, man? You're not. You can't come to Jesus and keep on, doing what you sin. You actually did meet Christ, right? So your life has changed, right? So we could come, I guess, to somebody and say it that way, but understand the person you're discipling and you yourself, we're just like this. It's the human condition. That's what I'm saying. The same problem in the first century is the same problem in the 21st century, and that's the heart of man.
Yep.
We like to say, "Hey, I'm going to heaven," and then start rearranging the pieces of the puzzle so we can ease our conscience. I mean, doesn't that? I mean, that does several things, but doesn't that talk about the grace and mercy of God that He would allow us to be saved and then think that we can rearrange what He said is true? And doesn't that speak to the human condition, right? So this is why ongoing discipleship conversations are so helpful, because this is not the first time we've had this conversation, is it?
No.
Right? And it's like, and it's helpful to keep revisiting those ideas and go, okay, I'm going to keep letting that fix my thinking. Romans 12, 1 and 2. I'm going to let that idea again continue to renew my perspective. I'm continuing. It's an ongoing process. Cool?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And so he says, what are we going to say then? Are we going to keep on sinning so that we can get more grace? And he said, no, absolutely not. That's not how it works. And then he says this really deep theological stuff. Verse 2, we died to sin, so how can we live in it any longer? Or wait a minute, don't you know that all of us who were baptized into Christ were baptized into his death? We were therefore buried with him through baptism into death, in order that just as Christ was raised from the dead through the glory of the Father, we too may live a new life. So that's some really heavy theological stuff, kind of stuff we love, right? That's the truth of God, man. That's the truth of God is what sets us free. So this baptism, so baptism by immersion, when you're baptized, you go under the water and then you're raised up.
Correct.
That's a picture, that's a physical picture of the theological truth that has happened in the mind of God when we accept Christ. You were living for yourself. You were indulging in the flesh, whether it's sex or buying, spending money, or just being lazy, or having the last word in an argument. All those, you were just living for yourself, and you came to Christ, and you gave your life to Him, and now you're gonna die to those things, because you were going to hell. Now you're going to heaven, right? Changes what? Everything, right?
Yeah.
And so this is the picture of baptism. You were just like Jesus died on the cross. You were buried with Him in baptism. And guess what? Just like He rose from the dead on the third day, physically, a bodily resurrection, you too came up out of the water, and now for the purpose of living a new life. That's the picture of baptism. So that's what we're keeping in our mind as we think about our life, and we're thinking about our spiritual growth. And so he says, and in verse 2, he says, by no means. Does yours say by no means there in verse 2?
Mine says, yep, by no means, exclamation point.
Yeah, absolutely not. So I wrote in my notes here, we've been given the power, right? We've been given the power to overcome sin, to choose God rather than sin. Before we didn't have the power, before we didn't even care.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, before I lived for myself. And this is the thing, since I've been saved, now there is this tug on my conscience. Right? There's this renewing that's happening. Man, this is why it's so important to have a mature believer to walk alongside you as you're wrestling with this stuff. A mature believer is going to be constantly showing grace, but constantly pointing them to living a holy life. And so before Christ, man, I lived for myself and indulge in the flesh, do as I please. But then after, when I received Christ, this process of changing my conscience, right? I've said before that your eye is made to see through, but your conscience is made to see with, right? And so before I was living for myself, I really didn't have an option. God wasn't on the radar. He wasn't something that I was curious about or interested in, right? But guess what? If I was going to hell and now I'm going to heaven, right? And I accepted Christ and said He's my Lord, and yes, it's clear to me that, and I understand to the fullest extent, as much as I can as I'm growing, that I could not have saved myself. If all that's true, I'm gonna start listening to my conscience, because God made my body, and He made my mind, and so I can think, and He made my conscience, and over time He's changing my conscience as I'm reading God's word and staying in these healthy, ongoing discipleship conversations. He's changing my conscience. So there in verse 2, he says, no way, by no means. We died to sin. And so that we can live in, how can we keep on living in it? No, we don't want to live in it any longer. So we've been given the power to overcome sin. We've been given a reason, right? We've been given a reason. I say this over and over. The reason for us saying yes to Christianity is because it's compelling. We're not groping in the darkness, hoping to find some truth. We have plausible, reasonable, intellectually honest explanations for why we are Christian, and all of that stuff builds the foundation of objective truth. So the Christian worldview is the best explanation for life as we experience, whether it's pain or pleasure or disappointment and just life as we experience it. The Christian worldview is the best explanation for that, and so I'm compelled. I can no longer say, well, it's like an option of strawberry ice cream or vanilla ice cream. No, I have to pick. I have to choose Jesus because I'm compelled. It's not an option.
Yeah.
And I understand this, but a lot of times the person that we're discipling, the men that you're going to be discipling, that's where they're going to be. They're going to say that they're convinced, and then to a degree they are, but they're becoming more and more convinced. As they're becoming informed in Romans 12, 1 and 2, they're transforming the way of thinking. And then they're going to start saying, oh, this Christianity thing, it's not a preference. It's not like over say in India where I'm going to, you're going to tell me about Jesus. Well, I'm going to take Jesus and I'm going to add him to the other things I believe just to be safe. He's not an add-on like Acts 17 when Paul was talking to people and said, oh, you're so religious. Look at there. You even got an altar for the God that you might not know, just in case. You still got all your bases covered. Good job, right? It's not like that. The Christian worldview ultimately is compelling. It compels us. And so we didn't have an option before we met Christ. Now we got the Spirit of God living in us, and he's developing and transforming our conscience, and we're growing in that way. And man, what a slow but continuous process, isn't it? So are we going to keep on sinning? No, we don't do that. But now we have an option, and now we've been given not only an option because of the Spirit living in us, but we've been given new desires. So think about that with a young Christian. He got his old desires that he still likes, but he got some new ones that kind of show up every once in a while, and he's like, oh, this my new desire is supposed to be for God. But my old desire used to be to have my own way. And then he goes to church, he goes throughout his week, and he's just going, and there's this constant battle. And we're going to keep talking about this because Paul does, especially in Romans 7 next week. But this constant battle of, here's my old nature. Man, it's present. But I know that I gave my life to Christ. And the battle to the slow process of rejecting my old ways of thinking, my old values, my flesh, getting my own way, the long, slow process of replacing the old with the new. Man, that's the battle. And if you're going to be a mature believer, you're going to engage that battle. And you're going to press on. We call that the perseverance of the saints. And you're going to come out on top because you've got the Spirit of God in you to accomplish that. So think about how many people we know who don't engage in that battle, David. They are quite happy with, this is just like so dangerous. I mean, they're happy with, and I don't mean this to be judgmental. I mean, this is my struggle. I've done this and I've battled with this. So many Christians are happy to live, I say a settle for Christian life. And I don't mean it like judgmentally. I'm just, this is where I've battled. This is where I struggle. I want to have the last word, right? I want to get my way. I know what that's like. But if you're gonna become a mature believer, we're gonna let this Word of God permeate even as deep as our conscience, so that we're choosing God and choosing humility and choosing not to have the last word, and not so that we respond in a way that would honor God. Man, what a difficult battle, but that's part of a maturity. That's part of growing. So in verse 2, so he says, are we going to keep on sinning so we can get more grace? In verse 2, he says, no, that's not the way it works. We don't do that. We have died to our sin, and for the purpose of walking in new life. So our baptism is a picture of what happened when we accepted Christ. Verse 4, we therefore are buried with him in baptism, in order that, or for the purpose of, that Christ was raised from the dead through the glory of the Father, that we too may live a new life. So that new life is, here's another thing to remember. I've done a lot of Christian things like mission trips and feeding the homeless and stuff, that. But the difficulty, or the problem, or it can accidentally happen, is that we would find our life in those things. Oh, so I feel bad, so I better go to the homeless shelter. I need to feel good, so I need to go to the homeless shelter. Make myself feel good again. And then when I go to the homeless shelter and I help those poor people, well, then I feel good about myself. So think of what a endless kind of a roller coaster existence that is. Now, I think I feel bad, so I'm going to go to the homeless shelter. Well, in the next week or 2 weeks, I'm going to start feeling bad again. Well, I need to give some money to the church.
Yeah.
A few more weeks, I'm going to feel bad about something, so I need to go do something to, help my neighbor. Cut a tree down or something. I need to do something to. And we look at those things that we do to make us feel better. We look at those things as the source of life. Is this like a great conversation to have, or what? All right.
Yeah. It's like a never-ending cycle, battle.
It's like a cycle, that roller coaster of. And so you could ask the question: well, do you feel good after you went and helped the poor people at the homeless shelter? Well, sure, you feel good.
Right.
Yeah. Do you feel good after you helped your friend because his tree came down and you went over with your chainsaw and you helped him? Well, of course you feel good after helping somebody. The problem is that we're going to substitute those things that make us feel good. We can substitute those things for the actual life of Christ. And here's a line. You know, the life of Christ can only come from Christ. I was walking in. We were down in Puerto Rico. I was walking in downtown San Juan. The sun was going down behind this church. There's a steeple. Man, beautiful picture. We were just like, you know, just walking in the front, you know, the street in front of the church. Sun's going down, and I look up, and there's this beautiful sky and the silhouette of the church, and the church had the name of the church on it. It was called some kind of church. I don't know what the name of it was, but I remember thinking, and here's the rest of the line. You know, it doesn't matter what label you put on the outside. Like that church had a label, right? It had a name, its name, right? So it doesn't matter what label you put on the outside. If you don't have the life of Christ on the inside, you don't have the life of Christ. You've got something else. Right? So these things that we do, like helping the homeless or helping our neighbor, cannot be, because they were never designed to be. They cannot satisfy, they can't be the source of life for us. They were not designed. I mean, like my wife, your wife, you know, what we're able to do for them, provide for them. Our wives were not designed to bear the weight. Think of that. We're not designed to bear the weight of satisfying your deep longing for significance and for life. Only God can do that. And so I'm walking down the streets of Puerto Rico, and I look up and I see the sign that says, you know, the name of the church, and I didn't know if there was any active members or if it was a dead church.
Right. Did it look like it would be dead?
Well, it was kind of dark, so it was a weeknight too, I believe, so there wasn't anybody on the inside, but no lights on the inside. But I've seen plenty of dead churches that were sold to some other. The land was sold for.
Oh yeah.
And I've been in them before. Sanctuary built for 500 people, and there's 8 of us in this church that Gina and I went to. So I've seen dead churches. And I've seen people trying to get sustaining life out of being good and trying harder, and it's just not supposed to be that way. God designed himself. I say God designed himself, but the idea is that our relationship with Christ he is the source of our life. In fact, that's what Colossians says, that he's the source of our life. So to extend this out just a little bit more, we can put, I mean, like I could think of one obvious thing for you. You could put at the pinnacle for the source of your life, those championship rings that you have, that you earned, and we've talked about how you know that, and how what's the word, elusive that and temporal that peace is. Feels really, really good for a really, really short time. So we can put stuff. So I could label you championship coach, and it would be true. We could label me, I suppose, missionary, disciple maker. We could label ourselves with something, but here's the point. It doesn't matter what label you put on the outside. If you don't have the life of Christ on the inside, you don't have the life of Christ. You've got something else.
Right.
Something else that's temporary, something else that's not eternal, something that wasn't designed to sustain this ongoing longing for God that he put in our heart. So what a great conversation to have with a growing believer. So